Wakey, wakey. Hello, Dr. Pomeranke. I heard your lecture tonight at the college on criminal biology. DNA, instinct, and aggression. It was a well thought out presentation, but a bit abstract. Too academic, if you ask me. What I want to know is, have you ever really lived out your theory? Or are you content writing your papers inside your ivory tower, torturing your captive audience of students with your intellectual posturing?
What do you want from me?
I'm here to test your hypothesis. You're a sociobiologist, are you not?
Yes.
Well, in your lecture, you argued for the genetic origins of crime. Biology determines behavior. Well, I'd like to debate you on that.
What do you mean, debate?
You know, dialectic. I make a proposition, you counter. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Only in this debate, the stakes are real. If you win, I let you go. If I win, that's part of the proposition.
What proposition?
The issue resolved. There is no valid reason why I should not kill you. Debating for the negative, Professor Pomeranke. And for the affirmative, yours truly.
You are gonna kill me. Please. Please. I'll do anything. Anything you say.
Stimulus. Response.
Please don't kill me.
Give me one good reason.
Okay. It's illegal. Murder's illegal. You'll go to jail.
I don't plan on being caught.
But it's wrong to kill.
Professor, don't go getting all moral on me. You said that our DNA determines our behavior. DNA has no morality.
It's abnormal. Your DNA is abnormal.
Abnormality has to do with statistical averages, Professor, not right or wrong.
But society agrees killing is wrong.
Society is another word for statistical average. We're not all from the same gene pool, you know.
That doesn't make it right.
And it doesn't make it wrong.
Our species won't survive if we allow killing.
You mean you won't survive? I will. Me, in my DNA.
You're a sick man. Your mind is diseased.
Correction. I'm a genetically determined man with a biological predisposition toward aggression. Killing is in my genes, all according to your theory. Which brings us back to the central question.
Please.
If all that I am is genetically determined, why should I not in fact kill you when I am scientifically bound by my DNA to do so?
Please, please have mercy. Take pity, I beg you.
There's no mercy or pity in these genes.
Please. Please.
I'm a predator by nature.
No. Please, I beg you. Please.
Beggars can't be choosers, Professor. Low survival rate. And I think it's time you learn your lesson. Ideas, you see, have consequences.
Time is ticking away. Welcome to the Strange O'Clock podcast with Michael and Jerry. Join us on an extraordinary journey into supernatural news from a Christian perspective. Delve into intriguing, sometimes conspiratorial topics that will captivate your imagination. Whether you're a Christian fringe believer or a truth seeker in paranormal phenomena, this podcast is tailor-made for you. Unravel mysteries, share stories, and gain biblical insights into the supernatural. Expand your spiritual horizons and tune in now to the Strange O'Clock podcast for an extraordinary adventure. Welcome to the Strange O'Clock podcast with Jerry and
Michael.
We've got our awesome, wonderful special guest that's super uber talented, that needs no introduction, but I'll give you a tiny introduction anyway. He's been on our show, my show, about 3 or 4 times before this, and then 2 times with Michael and I. It's Brian Godawa. And Brian Godawa, if you don't know, so Brian Godawa is an awesome, prolific author and screenwriter and a script doctor. And his latest book, Cruel Logic, is a departure from his usual amplifications of biblical stories. So this one is a suspense mystery thriller called Cruel Logic. So Brian, tell us in a nutshell what Cruel Logic is all about, and then we'll dive into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Cruel Logic is what I call a theological thriller novel. And it is the story of a brilliant serial killer on a American woke campus. And that's the unique environment and context. And what he does is he captures university professors and he debates with them on camera. And the topic of the debate is his moral right to kill them. And so what he does is he tells the various professors, whether it's evolutionary biologists or queer theorists, what have you, feminists, all the various ists that are at the university these days, as well as philosophy teacher, etc. And so he says, look, if what you say is true about reality, then give me one valid reason why I should not kill you, and I'll let you go. But if not,
Amazing.
I will kill you. So that's the premise of that's the hook of the story. And we could talk about the origin of that and all that and its background, but there's a second storyline that works together with that story at the same time. And so you do have a psychology professor who is connected to that killer, because the killer is actually an ex-philosophy professor. And the psychology professor is helping a cop capture him and track him down because he knows him. But meanwhile, there's another storyline that intersects with it, and it's the story of a young Christian man named Danny who goes to a California university called Thomas Burke University. And but it is in Riverside, by the way. But anyway, he goes to college. He's a freshman, so it's his first year there, and he's an evangelical Christian who's going to a secular college. And his parent is a pastor, and they're just a sort of a typical evangelical family. He's not a megachurch, but maybe he's a contemporary megachurch wannabe guy. Anyway, Danny goes to college there, and he gets sucked up into the social justice movement on campus. Falls in love with this girl and is brought into all that stuff, that radical activism that will ultimately force him to make some life and death decisions, actually. And so in that story, I'm exploring and revealing a lot of what goes on modern woke campuses in America. Many, almost all campuses, at least secular or public universities, certainly are now captured by the woke mind virus. And it's popularly expressed in DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's the dominant, I would say, the dominant institutionalization of the racist, anti-Christ, anti-Christian, bigoted paradigm that is controlling a lot of the thought of students today through being taught this, right? Yeah, so that's the two stories. And there's an overarching theme there that I'm dealing with, which is the loss of Western civilization and the loss of God in a culture. What ideas have consequences? So what are the consequences when you take God out of society or God out of education? And in particular, we know that the dominant sort of enemy, the primal enemy, primary enemy, I'd say, of the woke mind virus, or the woke religion, as it is, would be Western civilization. That's why they're always trying to tear down Western civilization, get rid of all of our elements and components. And what is the primary foundation of Western civilization? Judeo-Christianity. And so that's the ultimate villain to them. And so I wanted to explore this idea of what the university becomes a microcosm, really, of society at large. And so I'm exploring that reality. And interestingly, I wanted it to be realistic. And this isn't like I don't know. This isn't like a propaganda piece against the woke culture. I wanted to capture what it really is like. And so I actually drew from real events. All the events that occur on my campus in my story are rooted in real events that have occurred. Student protests against Western civilization, etc. So I wanted to be rooted in actual fact in that sense, to give and to see the story through this freshman's eyes, a naive, innocent person, and how easily we can be swept up into it because of the way that it appeals and manipulates our emotions and such. And so I wanted to capture this notion of Christian deconstruction that's very popular today. This idea of Christians embracing wokeness and losing their faith. We see this a lot in a lot of podcasts. We see these famous Christian celebrities describing their deconversion and such. And of course, it's always been the case for a couple hundred years that Christians sometimes go to college and lose their faith. It's not an unusual thing, but that's the term that's given these days. And so I wanted to address that issue in an honest and yet forthright manner. So that's the sort of context and environment that this serial killer story is taking place in.
But the word serial killer at the end of all that, it just suddenly like whips everybody to attention to a new degree.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what was the point was. Now, the origin of this story actually goes back quite a few years. I originally sought to get this. I originally wrote Cruel Logic as a screenplay for a movie because my background's in Hollywood. And I sought for many years to get it made, and I couldn't get it made. And it won many screenwriting awards, and a lot of producers were interested in it. But it happens. You can't always get movies made. And I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I've got to, I love this story. It's so much my baby that I have to get it out as a novel. And I finally found the opportunity, a moment where I could say I could pause on my Bible novels, which is what I've been writing successfully for the last 10 or 11 years. And finally get to this, which has been just a blast. But what's interesting was because when I first wrote the script, it was before all this woke stuff had really come to a head like it is now. And
wow, you're ahead of your time.
Yeah, no, really. But it had been there since the 1960s, but it's how it's come out now. It's so much, we didn't know how much it was there, but now we do. And so in a way, I'm glad I waited so long because it enabled me to really put that serial killer story within a wider, more relevant cultural context to today. Because the heart and soul of the story is this serial killer, and he's capturing these professors, right? And the idea here is that university professors are by and large atheists. If you look at the statistical numbers, They're from liberals to conservatives and from Christians to non-Christians in universities. It's 20 to 1, 20 liberals and non-Christians to 1 conservative or Christian, that kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
So it's
Right.
the higher education has been captured by this DEI monster. And
Yeah.
and so I wanted to deal with the notion of ethics, which is very popular now with social justice. But what is your ethics founded on? People argue all day long about what's right and wrong, and they assume that they have a moral system. But as a Christian, I've always had a deep problem trying to help unbelievers or atheists to understand, to think about their thinking. They think, but they don't think about their thinking, meaning they have a moral system and they believe that it's legitimate. But what they don't realize is it doesn't, atheistic, unbelieving worldviews do not comport with their morality. They claim things like you shouldn't murder, you shouldn't steal. And isn't that obvious to everyone? Actually, it isn't. If you look through history, it is not obvious that everyone agrees that murder is wrong and that rape is wrong. So it's clearly, where do you get, you have this belief, but how do you justify it? Where do you ground your belief? And most unbelievers have never thought that far. And to them, they can't even understand. What are you talking about? I believe in it. I believe in morality. It's intuitive. And so I wanted to embody the moral argument for the existence of God, which is a philosophical or a Christian apologetic approach. Moral argument for the existence of God. That's what I'm talking about here. And I wanted to incarnate that into a story. And that was actually the origin of the story, was that. And I wanted to deal with this notion of ethics and how the godless worldviews have no foundation to be able to argue for morality. They think they do, and they get hot under the collar when you tell them this. But if you step them through, if you're able to calm them down and step them through, you start to realize, look, actually you don't. In fact, the inspiration, I have to actually give it to an old, late Christian apologist named Walter Martin. And
Yeah, his
guy,
books.
oh yeah, he was way back in the 70s, even the 60s, right? And I had discovered him and I loved listening to him because he was a rascal.
Me too.
He had a good jocular humor, but he was also serious and he would be passionate. He had Pentecostal background. I loved him. And so I remember listening to this radio show of his called The Long John Nebel Show from back in the 60s. I would listen to his cassette tapes in the 90s. And he was describing his experience with a particular atheist where he was trying to help him, trying to argue that, look, I know you're an atheist, and I know that you have a moral system, but you don't have a foundation for the morality. And the guy, what do you mean I don't? I do. And he got so frustrated that the atheist could not think about his thinking that he said, he thought of a metaphor. He said, okay, it's 1940s. I'm a Nazi German with a gun pointed at your head and you're a Jew. Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you. And you know what? Obviously, it sounds very similar, doesn't it? Yeah, because I never forgot that example. And that was what many years ago that haunted me for so long. And I think the reason why is this. I love Christian apologetics. I love arguing about the existence of God and arguing for Christianity and the Christian faith. And I always have, and I love philosophy, but I realize that a lot of people don't get into philosophy, or it's for whatever reason. It's above their heads, or it's just too intellectual, or they just don't care for it. And that's fine. Not everyone has the same mental constitution. Not everyone likes the same things. I get that. And a lot of times things are too intellectual for people. They don't enjoy them, but we all enjoy stories, right? And of course, I'm a storyteller. And I thought, when I heard the metaphor, that story, I realized that was a perfect narrative embodiment of this argument for the existence of God, that I felt you could entertain someone and tell a great story about that very scenario, say with a serial killer where he would do it over and over again so we could see various moral systems. And I thought it was a great way to deal with this notion of, and make philosophy entertaining again, right? And actually deal with the argument for the existence of God from a narrative perspective, and that might connect with people in a way that a philosophical text cannot. And that's been the heart of a lot of my storytelling anyway. But this one was a particular one because I know that you can't write much about philosophy without people's eyes glazing over. And I feel like this is the thing, because I've already had a lot of readers tell me, yeah, I don't normally read that philosophy stuff, and those arguments are really deep, but they really enjoy it. And that was my goal. I wanted people to enjoy it and be entertained. And if you can get more out of it, then that would be great.
It's a riveting book, Brian. I'm, like I said when I emailed you, I'm about 6 chapters in, and I'm listening to your narrator and how he's morphing between these different characters, and he does a great job. And
Yeah, he
even when
does.
he was articulating LaShonda or Lavonda, I'm sorry, what's her name again? The African American young lady.
Yeah. It's now you got me confused because you said
Oh,
two names.
I'm sorry, I
It's
forget her name. Oh, I can look on your
Oh.
website. Oh my gosh. But anyway, so when he was articulating the way she was speaking, I thought, oh
LaShonda,
my
I
gosh.
think.
I think it's Lavonda or LaShonda, one of those. It starts with an L. And when he's a Caucasian white guy, and he's talented with his voice narration, and he's able to get into the voice of the African American young lady, and it was believable. And then then he morphed over to the British Dr. Charles Cullen, the serial philosophy killer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how many voice artists can do that for portray a black young lady that's pretty woke to this British Caucasian philosophy killer? I'm like, that's
Wow.
pretty amazing. And by the way, I thought you did a great job with the AI artwork on your page, because when we read about characters, I know I do, I try to think of what celebrity do they look like. I do
Yeah.
that with every book I read. And so when you said that she looked a little bit like Rihanna, she was beautiful, and her hair was straightened with in a ponytail and everything, so I asked AI to create her, and you said that was pretty good. But when I
It
looked
was
at
close.
your version was bang on to your description. Obviously, you should know, you would know, you wrote her. But it is interesting how fiction that's based and rooted in actual accounts and experiences is the vehicle to teaching truths in an entertaining manner. I remember Chris Pratt in one of his little speeches, he said, if you want to give somebody a pill, if you want to give a dog a pill, you put it in a tasty morsel of meat. And that's your book, your story is the tasty morsel of meat, and then the truth is embedded within that, which is, I thought that was pretty awesome and clever.
Yeah. No, I think one of the problems with a lot of Christian literature, Christian storytelling is, now look, I'm an unabashed Christian and I write about that kind of thing, but I don't write Christian novels in the sense that this is a Christian novel, but I want people to be aware of, look, I'm dealing with Christian themes from a Christian worldview, because a lot of people don't want to be surprised and they're not interested in it, and that's okay. I don't want to turn people away. I don't want to bait and switch people. So I make it clear that's what it's about from. But the truth is, the stories
awesome.
that I write are both, to me, if it's not entertaining, I'm not going to tell the story. And to me, entertainment value is as equally important to me as the meaning or the message of the story. And particularly, I call it meaning. And this is the most Christian storytelling suffers from the elevation of the meaning or the message over the craft, because after all, the gospel is the most important thing. The gospel is more important than getting it right. The gospel is more important than spending $1 million on making a great movie or whatever. Or $10 million. That's too much money. But the message is the most important. It doesn't matter how much we spend or whether we do it right or perfect. What matters is the message. That, I think, is a common suffering of a lot of Christian work. And I've believed for a long time that no, your value of the craft and of the entertainment value should be equally as ultimate as your intent on the meaning, because in a very real sense, the medium is the message. In a very real sense, let's put it this way, the best storytelling is the stories that incarnate your values, not the ones that preach sermons. So that's why you see a lot of Christian storytelling where they have this mentality that I'm telling the story as an illustration, as a sermon, like their art becomes a sermon aspect, and that's why it suffers. I don't see it that way. I want to tell a great entertaining story that makes sense within the world and the rules of the world, etc. And that's just entertaining, and that's equally important to me. And I don't know how else I can express it than that way. Everything I write has my worldview in it, but I'm more interested in incarnating it into the story rather than using the story as a means to the end, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Brilliantly. There's so many quotable tweets that need to be transcribed into the world. I have a question I have a lot of questions. Lord, which one should I ask? So, how much have you looked into the whole debate between atheism and Christendom from the C.S. Lewis perspective, the G.K. Chesterton, the kind of traditional debate this last century, and how has that evolved into this novel? Because it gives me, as someone who hasn't read it yet, Sherilyn's reading, and I can't wait to read it, but I'm immediately reminded of this debate. Okay, how do we win the atheists? How do we win the people in the colleges? How do we break into that little space with these people that are being brainwashed? Is there any kind of an echo of that? And what's your take on that as far as maybe what C.S. Lewis and friends did to today, the debate of winning the atheist, which is the eternal conundrum for most believers that I know?
Yeah. I guess in a way, I start by not trying to win them, not trying to save them. Meaning, A, I leave that up to God, but B, I'm trying to communicate what I believe is true. And I'm trying to do so in a way that is honest and fair with the opposing viewpoints. So if I have a villain or a character in a story with, when you're dealing with a theme in a story, one of the common aspects of storytelling is if you've got a major theme, like one of my major themes is ideas have consequences, right? I don't want to just make all Christians look good and all atheists look bad, right? That's the propaganda approach.
That's always
I make atheists realistic people. Some of them are good and how shall we say it, in a shallow cultural sense. They're not before God, but before man, they can be good people and be atheists. And you can have Christians who are bad people. And I have that actually in my stories because people are not perfections. And so all my characters have flaws, have sins, have secrets, and whether you're Christian or not. And so I think actually I quote G.K. Chesterton in my novel. And I don't think I quote Lewis. I can't remember if I do. I quote Dostoevsky. I draw from a lot of the history of ethics. And so whether it's the philosophers or, in my opinion, Dostoevsky, he dealt with the problem of evil and the existence of God probably better than any of the philosophers did. So I include him in my story and his conundrums from the brothers Karamazov. In fact, that's a perfect example of what I'm saying. You could read all these philosophy textbooks and it becomes means for you to rationalize your prejudice. That's what Nietzsche would say. And that's what philosophy texts could end up doing. But when you read Dostoevsky and he's telling it in the context of a story, you hit in the heart with your compassion and the pain that you can feel of the nature of real evil. But yet, how does that affect God? And I think like probably one of the dominant themes through all my stories is eviling the existence of God. Meaning, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I struggle with all my life, even as a Christian. God, why is there so much evil? And why is evil so powerful and so strong and growing sometimes, it seems, right? And not only that, but the suffering, right? It's, God, how can there be such suffering in this world? And why do you allow it? Why do you allow it? And that's always been, I think that's one of the most universal questions. And that's why it is a dominant theme throughout all my writing, because I'm wrestling with it. And I believe it's one of the few legitimate concerns on any human heart. The problem is that whereas most unbelievers think that's a death nail in the coffin of God, right? Aha, gotcha. It's because we don't have the answers, the bottom line. We don't know. God hasn't revealed it to us. It uses things for his purposes. But in the end, we can't give the exact reason, but we can give the only logical reason that's possible for the existence of evil. And that is God is a loving, compassionate God. And so he has a morally sufficient reason for the evil that he allows in this world, but he doesn't tell us what it is. But he is a legitimate enough character for us to trust in him that he will do what is right and just in the end. And of course, unbelievers don't like that because that's not an answer to them. But what they don't realize is it is a logical answer. It's actually logically perfect. The problem is that they want to be God. They want God's place. They don't want to be accountable to God. So if they don't have an answer the way that makes them satisfied, they're not going to believe it. But in truth, what all it is they're just looking for an excuse to not believe in God. Because in reality, and here's the heart and soul of it is, in reality, they are the ones with the problem of evil, not Christians. It's unbelievers that have a problem with the existence of evil, because if there is no transcendent, personal, triune God who defines what objective morality is beyond our subjective experience, there is no such thing as moral right and wrong. There is only
Yes.
power.
Right.
And that's another thing that I deal with a lot in the novel, because I think philosophically, this is why I think we're at a crossroads that is very clarifying, right? We live in a world now that is very polarized, right? And we see this social justice, this woke movement that has this strange other world kind of morality that turns everything around to be its opposite. So yeah, genocide of the Jews is right. Yeah, that's good. But not accepting trans people is genocide. So they believe everything, the opposite of everything that is true, but they've learned how to use language to turn everything around upside down. And this is rooted in postmodernism and and the rejection of absolutes. But my point is, they ultimately believe everything is reducible to power relations. So in a way, they've admitted openly that all they believe in is power. But then when you push them on, they won't accept that. They won't admit that. And it's all you believe in power is in power. So therefore, all your arguments are not rooted in anything that's rational or anything that's morally culpable, morally legitimate. You're just arguing to get power because you want power over those who have power. But from a deeper perspective, it's like without that transcendent objective deity, all you are is either matter in motion, molecules colliding with each other. There's no rape or murder. There's no rightness or wrongness about rape or murder. There's just molecules colliding with each other, right? There's just different cultural, social constructs of morality fighting for power over one another. So even the social justice people who talk about all the wrongness of racism or whatever, like they're a joke because according to their own system, racism isn't wrong. It's just some people hate other races and you can't call it wrong because if you call it wrong, you are just simply exerting your power over other people who disagree with you. So that's why in a very real sense, I think our choices are either the eternal God or raw power. And that power philosophy is what's called nihilism. Nietzsche warned about this, but his beliefs led to it. And it ultimately leads to violence. That's what it is. And it's, in other words, it begins with economic violence. They're trying to cancel you. They try to take away your ability to to make money for a living, right? And that results in starvation. And so ultimately they want to kill us. Ultimately, they want to imprison us or kill us. And that's what that philosophy will lead to. Now, does that mean every postmodern and every woke person wants to literally kill us outright? No, it doesn't. However, we're seeing some of that ultimate end leak through into their political machinations, don't we? 50% of, what is it? 50% of the like 18 to 25-year-olds in this country believe in the genocide of the Jews. They believe in the Hamas and the genocide of Jews. And they're protesting for it on campus, actually protesting for genocide from the river to the sea. And so in a way, the violence is starting to leak out and what they really want to do with us and what they really want to do with people. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean that all of them are Nazis. It just means that their philosophy is Nazi, but they have not come to the logical conclusion of their beliefs yet.
Yes.
They have not realized how their ideas lead to consequences. And that's I think I went way off topic maybe from Michael's original thing, but to bring it back in.
No, it's great. Yeah.
It is.
I incarnate it like Chesterton and Lewis did, but I have some of their actual arguments in there. Not only do my professors who are arguing, they'll quote from Socrates, Plato, they'll quote from Rousseau, Hobbes, all these various philosophers throughout history, including modern ones like Dawkins and even some of the popular ones, right? They'll quote, literally quote from these guys and what they say about ethics. And I also have a Christian who's a cop in the story. And he draws from Dostoevsky, he draws from G.K. Chesterton. In fact, another main protagonist in the story is the psychology professor. And I based him, he's a character who's similar to a Jordan Peterson, and because I love Jordan Peterson. And so he's a psychology professor, and he believes in Western civilization. He's trying to bring it back into the school, into the colleges, because As we know, it's been kicked out of Western civilization courses and such. They're trying to get the curriculum out of everywhere. And so he's defending that. And he is actually a lapsed Jew. So his father was a rabbi, but he's rejected it in terms of the typical sort of whatever. He's become a secular man and he studied psychology. But over the years, he came to recognize the value of Western civilization rooted in Judeo-Christianity. And even though he doesn't have the faith, he defends Western civilization and defends the value of the Christian faith, even though he doesn't have it, see? And I've found that to be there are a lot of these guys out there that I have great respect for. Douglas Murray, Tom Holland, who's another guy. They defend Christianity as a foundation of Western civilization, even though they themselves are not necessarily Christians. In fact, one of them just became a Christian, Ayan Hirsi Ali. Fantastic. Go hear her testimony. It's all over YouTube right now. And I love these guys because they're intriguing to me, right? They defend, they agree, they get it. They get the rationality of Christian faith, but there's something lacking, and that something is ultimately the Holy Spirit. We can't save ourselves. We can't save ourselves through knowledge and by our own strength. God has to change us. But what is that? What is it like to have that really, I call it a cognitive dissonance, where you're defending all this stuff, but you don't really have the personal faith connection to that God that you're defending. And so this is not judgmental on my part by any means. Like I said, I respect these guys. Probably they're my most respected influencers in this world. As I mentioned, Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson. But it still is an interesting phenomenon that I felt, I want to explore this. And so that's what I do as well in the novel. There's a lot of different angles through the different characters.
Brian, I have to say that I took philosophical ethics in order to get my associate's degree in psychology from Liberty University. And I remember that they brought up the scenario that a lot of atheists bring up, is that there can't be a good omnipotent God. Because of the problem of evil and suffering, the atheists and a lot of people who struggle with this line of thinking, including us Christians, is okay, since there's lots of suffering and evil in the world, then if God was omnipotent, such that he could do anything he wanted to, but yet chooses not to address the problem or rectify the problem of all the suffering and all the evil that's occurring in the world, so then if there was an omnipotent, all-powerful God, then he can't be good. He must be malevolent. Or they think that if he is a good God, and if he's 100% good, but perhaps he's unable to rectify the problem of evil and suffering. So they can't seem to reconcile a good and all-powerful God. And so what the book was saying, and so it was ethics from a Christian perspective. So what it was saying was like, okay, the atheist or the doubter, whatever, puts their thinking above God. And for example, like if a person happens to go into a room and they don't see all of the, say, microbes, let's say they don't see all the germs and the microbes in the room, and they turn on the light and they say, there's no germs or microbes in here. And then they leave. And it's like the same way, in like manner, it's the person saying that, oh, if there is a good omnipotent God, there should be there can't be a good omnipotent God because there's no reason for it. So in other words, because they don't see the reason or rationale of allowing evil and suffering as a good omnipotent God, it doesn't mean that there isn't a good omnipotent God. I don't know if I'm really explaining that really well.
It's a classic logical fallacy. If I don't know of a good reason for the evil to be there, then there can't be a good reason. We're contingent, finite creatures who are highly subjective. We don't know objective reality. We don't know what the other side of the universe looks like. We don't even know what it looks like outside of our Earth. Now we can know, but in general, it's like normal people, like we don't know hardly anything. If you think about the knowledge of the universe, we know almost nothing. And so it's the supreme arrogance of unbelief when the unbeliever says, if I'm not told a legitimate good reason why evil exists, then there's not a good reason. Like, that's ridiculous, right? And that's why the mystery of evil is not acceptable to them, because they're not going to get the reason. The reason is only that God has a morally sufficient reason. So the best you can do is give an example of Which, by the way, that what you're talking about is the argument, Hume's argument. It's like God is either a malevolent deity. If he can get rid of the evil, but he doesn't, then he's malevolent. And if he can't get rid of the evil, then he's impotent. What kind of a God, thus? That kind of a thing.
Right.
But so where I was getting to was, what was I saying? Oh, so yeah. So this idea that the best you can do is give analogies, because we cannot know objective reality. We cannot know objective reality. We're subjective beings. Now we make claims to objective reality and we have to justify them. But I would argue that in terms of ultimate truths, it has to be revealed to us. In other words, God has to reveal himself to us, or we could never know him, or we could never know
Amen.
what is objectively true or real. In fact, this is why I would argue, like, as if I wasn't a Christian, I would be a nihilist, because really there'd be so many things all these things that we think are true, we have no way of proving any of them, and we think we do, but they don't. Hume's argument, for example, for causality. How do you know the future will be like the past? How do you know if I throw this billiard ball, it's going to hit the other one and go in the pocket? Because every time I do it, it does. Well, if you're logical about this or scientific, that doesn't mean it's going to do that in the future. It just means every time you did it in the past, it did. But what's your basis for knowing that it's going to always do that in the future? How do you know? Well, that's a physical law. Where's the law? What do you mean law? How do you know it's a law? In order to know it was a law, you'd have to know that it is always going to operate the same everywhere in the universe at all times, in the past and in the future. But we don't have that capacity. We don't exist in that category. So we do draw inferences, we do infer from things, but if you think about it, there's no proof for anything of all that. Science itself is rooted in an assumption of the uniformity of nature. That is a complete faith commitment that they have no way to prove. They're assuming nature is uniform, but they have no justification for saying that, because they have no way to know that at all, unless there's a true transcendent God who's revealed to us this sense of nature, and then we have a justification for it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't engage in science as an unbeliever, because obviously they do, but all it means is these things like the problem of evil and all this stuff, really anything that an unbeliever engages in, it doesn't comport with their worldview if they were to look at it consistently. And that's where all these unbelieving worldviews collapse. And so this idea so the answer to the Hume's dilemma is, no, God has a morally sufficient reason why he allows the evil, but he hasn't revealed it to us necessarily. And so now sometimes actually he does, right? Like he reveals to us why he allowed why his hand, actually, the Bible says, his hand engaged in the crucifixion of the Son of God, which is the ultimate crime of the universe.
Yes.
But yet, and that was an evil, but God was using it for his good, because he ended up becoming the sacrifice for sins that would allow people to come back into relationship with God. That's one religious example. Okay, people don't get maybe they don't accept religion, but they certainly understand that basic concept. Or how about, one of my favorite concepts is some little child gets bit by an animal and he gets a rabies shot and it really hurts, if you know about rabies shots. And the child's crying and it's like, why are you doing this to me, Daddy? It's evil, right? He doesn't know that it's the greater good that his dad is giving him that rabies shot because it's going to save his life. Analogies are not perfect, but at least it shows you that so much of what we think is the case is not the case further down the road. And so it's not irrational. Not only is it not irrational, it's completely logical to actually argue that God is a trustworthy as creator of the universe. And so when he tells us all will be made right in the end, we can trust him on that. It is a mystery in that sense. And we don't get the exact answer that we want to hear that will make us satisfied. But the inability to accept that simply is the delineation between faith and unbelief, but it's also the delineation between actual morality and false morality. If you refuse to accept that, you have no foundation for your morality. But if you accept it, you then have a foundation to call murder wrong. But if you don't accept it, you have no reason to call murder wrong. So I don't want to get too technical here, but it is a way of arguing that's called transcendental reasoning, and it's similar to what Kant actually talked about, though Kant was not is not the same as what I'm saying, but he's the closest thing in the sense that he did try to address this notion of objective reality. But he didn't root it in the Judeo-Christian God. He tried to root it in reason. But the problem is reason itself has to be justified. It has to be grounded, because you don't know that reason is true or that it works everywhere in the universe at all times, right? So you can't root anything in reason, because reason itself has to be rooted in something deeper. And you got to keep going deeper to find out, well, what's your foundation? What's your foundation? But the transcendental approach is this notion that in order for morality to even make sense, certain things about the universe have to be true. And those things that have to be true do not comport with atheism, for example.
Right.
Something that is morally right or wrong is right or wrong with objectively speaking. It's not rooted in subjective experience. Therefore, just because someone may subjectively feel it's right doesn't make it right. Now, we all agree on that. Most people would agree with that. Yeah, just because you think racism is right doesn't make it right. Okay, but the problem is, in order to believe that something is right or wrong, it has to be rooted in that objective value. But if you don't have a transcendent God revealing that value to you, then nothing's right or wrong, because every argument reduces to absurdity. You could say, oh, I have intuitive feelings. I know murder's wrong or racism is wrong. And it's like, you do? Well, a lot of people don't. Billions of people don't, and have not throughout all of history. So what makes you right over everybody else? And there's no answer to that other than I feel it's wrong. Half the world feels it isn't wrong. And then you could go down the line. It doesn't, evolutionary values, it doesn't promote survival. That doesn't make it wrong. That just makes it survival oriented. But who says survival is right or wrong? Who says survival is even, who says that survival is even something we should pursue? Now that seems absurd to people, because of course we should pursue survival, but think about your thinking. You want to survive.
Think about your thinking.
What does it matter if you survive or not? Because you're going to be dead longer than you're alive anyway. Death, really, in a godless universe, death is the only absolute. It is the primary value, because everything goes towards death. Death is the absolute, the ultimate for everything. So you can't say survival is my goal, because you're not going to survive, so it doesn't really matter. Death is more real than survival in a godless universe or worldview, if that makes sense, right? So these are just some of the things that I do wrestle with.
Absolutely.
I deal with Hume, I deal with Socrates, and the problem of Euthyphro. As you get deeper in the novel, you'll see.
I'm so excited to listen to all of it. Brian, when I thought of your book, I thought of the philosopher, and I don't remember his name, who said, if there isn't a God, then all manner of evil is acceptable. And I'm paraphrasing what he says. Dostoevsky. Okay.
Yes.
So
all is permissible.
Then all is permissible. If there isn't a God, then all manner of evil is permissible. And that's not a direct quote, but Dostoevsky. And that actually was brought up in a Christian movie that you probably don't like, but God's Not Dead. But it is interesting that the center character is the young man who is a Christian, and his faith grows stronger, and where he challenges his professor. Anyway, but we know that the central character, the young man who's the college student, that he goes through deconstruction, and I'm so excited to find out what happens to his faith. Does he deconstruct, or does his faith grow stronger? Does he get killed by Dr. Cullen? Who knows? So I'm excited.
And I'm not telling.
And you're not telling, right? But I'm about 5 or 6 chapters in, and it's riveting, folks. I would definitely listen or read it. And if you want something that's very riveting and suspenseful and entertaining, but yet very intelligent and asks those hard questions and causes you to think about your thinking, just like Brian said, think about your thinking. And one of the things
Very good quote.
A very good quote. Yes. One of the things that I thought of is, so if a person believes in evolution, that only the strong survive, by Charles Darwin. And so if only the strong survive, and we're just here to, like you said, to one up each other, and to get more money and power and food, clothing, shelter, water, better job, better car, better house, better spouse, whatever. If it's just to better oneself and improve until you're like at the pinnacle of your society or something, then what's to cause that person to uh, have a family? A lot of atheists, they've got a wife, they've got a husband.
Yeah, this
they've
is good.
got children.
This is good.
And just real quick, so I know, like, for example, sometimes I scratch my head, like, okay, you're an atheist, but you're married. If I didn't believe in God, I would not be married. That is just the end of my thinking, because I know there is a God brought us together, and I love my husband. If there isn't a God, hey, you can do whatever, do whoever. And so that is the conclusion of not having a God.
That's because you're conservative in a generic sense, and you're a Christian. You think about the ramifications of your beliefs. You think about the consequences of ideas. Most unbelievers do not. But by the way, this is an argument that atheists will make against Christians. So you're telling me that if you didn't believe in a God, you would murder people because there'd be no basis for justifying murder as wrong anyway? You're a creepy person. I don't want to be around you. They try to make a rhetorical argument, but the problem is, again, it's what you're pointing out is that they're simply not being logical with their worldview. But here's what's going on in the big picture. This is what the Bible talks about. It's called suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. This is Romans 1 and 1:18 and such. And it talks about how man knows God has placed within us conscience. That's from him. That's not arbitrary. Yes. And in the creation around us, the natural order reflects to a certain degree God's glory, at least, and his grandeur, but then also within ourselves. And interestingly, Kant actually tried to make that argument as well. From the stars, glorious stars around, to the eternal conscious within. But the problem was, he drew from the Bible and he drew ideas, but he never founded them. He never rooted them in the triune God of the Bible. He tried to make the arguments without God as part of it, and make it intuitive. And I'm getting off track again. I apologize. So you're saying, okay. So the problem is, it's nonsense though. Look at our society. There's lots of people who aren't Christians. We all believe rape is wrong, and racism is wrong, and murder is wrong, and stuff like that. You're ridiculous to say that. But the true problem is you're not looking wide enough, and you're not looking historically enough, because all throughout history there are many cultures who have believed in rape and believed in murdering, genocide, and all this kind of stuff as being justifiable. And so just saying we all know it's not wrong, it's wrong, is no argument at all. That's a child's argument, right? But what is it? The question that the heart of the questions you're saying is, I mean, what makes these people agree with us on so many of these morals that they don't agree with us of the God and the morals? And this is where the biblical argument is, we are all created in the image of God. God creates us. He places within us that certain sense of his awareness and his presence. And then we choose to negate him. We choose to reject him. And so what we do is, and that sin stains us, it pollutes us, it affects every aspect of our being, including our rationality. However, that doesn't mean we're absurd. We still carry the image of God, even though we reject him. It's a polluted image, but it's still the image, if that makes sense. And part of that image is this intuitive sense of right and wrong, of murder's wrong, racism is wrong, right? And in a very real sense, that unbeliever who is claiming that they believe the same morality as a Christian, it contradicts their view, but also it proves Christianity. It's proving that they are stealing and borrowing from Christianity. Murder's wrong, rape is wrong, that it's objectively wrong, right? Racism is wrong. They're borrowing or stealing from Christianity and claiming to agree with you, because they do, because they know in their conscience that isn't, because God put it there, right? But then they're rejecting the God or foundation of that morality. So that's, not only is their belief in morality contradictory with their worldview of a meaningless, purposeless universe of random chance, right? Not only does it contradict their worldview, but it shows that they actually do know there's God, and they agree with him only to the extent that it will benefit them, and then they reject the God who gives that truth to them. And that's the moral culpability of the unbeliever before God.
You need no one to interject in your dialogue, dear sir. And a creator of worlds, and I could talk to you for hours even just about that process of, the Bible says, like, God creates evil and good. And you're doing this, and then I'm writing a lot, rough drafting, and it's scary when you're in control of the entire universe that you're composing. And I'd love to talk to you on that note too. But just as to what you're saying, I just wanted to say Psalm chapter 2, God shall laugh. Derek Prince mentions it's not just out of humor and sarcasm, but he laughs out of triumph against his enemies that are trying to suppose that they can oppose God in all this. And you see, any logical, rational person can see this is insane. I'm not around billionaires, but my father is a concert violinist that just retired, and he's constantly surrounded by people of incredible wealth. And it's amazing to see how dumb these people are when it comes to evil. They're like, you need to wear your mask and get to stay in the orchestra. And it's just, the Nazi thing is back. It's back full throttle with all of the hypocrisy, with all the blindness. And you're doing a great job painting this picture. I'm looking at the AI art on the site of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Inquiry Board. And it looks like every single universe I've been through does so many universities.
They're cliches. They're cliches in that sense.
It's great. It's really cool. Can you I wanted to ask you this too about the AI. Like, how are you balancing that with your creative flow? And then you're using automation. Like, we're all having this question in our heads. Is this okay? Like, we're creators, but we're using AI. Like, how do we go about this? And how are you implementing this into the novel on the cast of characters site for the novel?
Yeah. As an artist, I've been a graphic designer for much of my life. I know the experience of being the artist and creating works of art. And I've had to think through the issues of whatever, copyright or rights to, and all that kind of stuff. And I'll admit it's a gray area right now, and they're still processing through it legally, trying to figure out what is acceptable and what isn't. And it's not black and white. The idea that AI scours the internet, draws from everything, right? But I use it as a tool because for the first time, I'm able to capture the look of what I really want my characters to look like for people to see in a way that I couldn't in the past. If I were to have to hire an artist to do these, it would cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. I couldn't afford it. So AI has afforded me that ability to do that. Now, in terms of the morality of AI, I'm still open to the debate, but in principle, all artistic endeavor, me as an artistic designer, I was an illustrator. I've been a graphic designer. What we do is we look at all the stuff that's out there and we draw from it to create our work. Like, I'll look, okay, I want something to look a little like this, or like maybe if I were to hire an artist to paint these pictures or whatever of my characters, I would say, make them look a little bit like Mark Strong or like this or that. And they would draw from real people in the real world or real images they've seen that may be, quote, copyrighted. The point is, all art is drawing from other people's works and meshing it together into a unique image of your own, see? And so in principle, I don't have a problem with it, even though it would be drawing from my works or whatever. But because the final artwork is a creative interpretation, right? And that's what all art is anyway. It's a creative interpretation drawn from other stuff that is out there that exists, including art. Yeah, so AI is pretty much doing the same thing that artists do, but it has, because of its computer nature, it has a broader range that it can draw from. It can draw from a billion images, whereas me as an artist, I would look at 100 images and draw from them as my own, if I was creating my own work. When I design a cover, I look at all the thriller covers and I make my cover look similar to them because, and sometimes I draw little pieces or images from other thriller covers. Ooh, I like this, I like that. And so I designed my Cruel Logic cover based on the most popular looking images in the thriller genre that draws people to the novel. See, that's the nature of art. Again, I think I've probably gone off onto a tangent that we don't.
No, I want to comment on that, if that's okay. As someone that's lived outside the States for 20 years and a big fan of Asian kind of pop culture and whatever, anime, video games in my teenage years, but I've noticed something, that Americans have this weird thing, feel like they have to invent everything from scratch or else they're not the ultimate god of art. Like they have to, but yet Japanese and Asian and other cultures, they have no problem with, I'll use an analogy that some of the nerds will know, the Metal Gear series, where they literally copy pasted Rambo, Tom Clancy novels, a few other things, Kurt Russell movie, Escape from New York, and they just literally copied. You can see, they didn't even try. They just meshed all these things together, and then they added their own things and they salted their own influences and inspirations in there, and then it became this absolutely incredible, unique thing.
And what you're talking about is what you're talking about is called sampling. And we had the copyright issues years ago with hip hop music, because they would literally take beats and stuff from other songs and use them to craft their own unique things. And I don't know what all the rulings were about that, but as I understand it, it's no, as long as you are changing the context, manipulating it, whatever, that's called fair use doctrine. There's all kinds of different components, but the point is, though, there's a limit, and it's a gray issue. Anybody who, even if they think they're original, they're not, because they're still drawing from their memory of being exposed to other people's art. Exactly. So there's no real true originality, okay? But this is why it's gray, because there's something where, okay, I saw something in the past and I got a vague memory and I create my own work. Okay, that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum is, cheating and literally just like maybe copying and pasting an entire book and calling it your own. That's ridiculous, but that's the extreme. Or like you said, or actually now you can now fake AI images of videos of people talking. But anyway, it's a continuum, and then we have to decide as a society, how far are we allowed to go before it becomes a violation of other people's rights. And I think we're still in the middle of that, because we have not actually experienced the full potential of AI, but enough of it for us to be wrestling with that right now. And there is no black and white answer to it. So we have to establish those lines, just like fair use had to be established. Because look, you could say, I want to address this person's music video. It's immoral, or it has bad views, and I want to talk about it, but I can't show it. I can't talk about it. That's not fair at all, because the person is not seeking to monetize that video as the video is monetizing. They are commenting on it, and that's what fair use doctrine is, which allows us on YouTube to be able to show clips out of videos and comment on them, right? But you can't show a lot, like you can't show the whole music video. Or if you're going to show a whole music video, you have to have you on there stopping it and talking about it to justify this is commentary. So that's just one example of how we have to define what our limits are until it becomes raw exploitation versus fair use. So I guess this is relevant to the book in that it's ethics, right?
I really like your AI artwork. And even before AI was a thing, you were creating some amazing graphic design for your novels. And I've seen your cover artwork before AI became a thing. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really neat that you've been able to create that. And I think the more illustrations that are high quality, the better. And when I saw the characters that are in your book, I thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because how many times when you read it, like I said, when you read a book and you're trying to envision that person, is this who the author is trying to say that he or she looks like? But then when you said, oh, did you happen to see this webpage with the artwork of my characters? I go, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for. And aside from graphic novels, for the most part,
it's very, very amazing. Yeah.
Very
you
helpful.
don't really see. Yeah, it's very helpful.
Interesting you say this
And that's
because
an author. Yeah, it's very helpful for your like you're creating these
Absolutely.
people out of nothing, and then there's oh my gosh, yeah, that kind of wow. All right, never thought of that.
In fact, I sometimes will create the images but while I'm writing the story as my own inspiration. I'll sometimes design the book cover before I've even launched in the novel because I have a sense of the vibe and it is a part of the creative process. But what's really cool is on my website, something we haven't talked about is the previous stuff we have, which is the Chronicles of the Nephilim, Chronicles of the Apocalypse, Chronicles of the Watchers. These are those
All great
Bible
books.
novels and it deals with the supernatural world, angels and demons. But anyway, it's
Not just Bible novels, guys. These are like these are
supernatural.
Michael
yeah.
Heiser out there fringe,
Yeah,
like
totally.
everything that answers the questions of UFOs, and these are the Bible novels that you want to buy your grandkids, your kids, your nephews, your
Yes.
friends. This
Yeah,
is the anthology that you want.
I've got like 16 of them or something like that. But anyway, it covers a lot in the Bible and there's a lot of characters. Anyway.
Yes.
And so what I recently did do just this year was I actually did go through all the novels and did AI images of all the primary and secondary and some of the tertiary or third important characters, most of the characters in the novel. And they're actually on the website for free, most of them. But I ended up realizing that this is so cool that I put them into books. And so I've got 2 books that have all the characters from all the different series. And they're just called the Character Picture Book for Chronicles of the Nephilim, something like that. But I've got like
That's awesome.
400 images of all these
Wow.
characters. And so people who are fans can actually go and look and see the characters as they are envisioned in the novel. And I did it. I didn't expect to make a lot of money on it, but they're selling pretty well because the fans really do enjoy them. So they're a great resource. You can just go online and get most of them for free anyway. So on my
a visual-
website. In other words.
It's a visual smorgasbord of characters. That's awesome. That's great. So, Brian, to purchase any of your books, people would go to
Amazon.com. It's exclusively everything's and almost everything I've written is in paperback, some in hardcover, ebook, as well as audiobook. And it's all exclusively on Amazon. That's the way I'm able
Awesome.
to make a living. But if you want to know, if you want to like just explore all these characters and some other free cool stuff related to the novels and learn about the novels, you can also go to Godawa.com. That's my name, Godawa.com. But the truth is, if you go straight to Amazon, there's enough descriptions of all the books that you can find out if you're interested in buying the book right from Amazon itself. So that's what I recommend.
That's where I downloaded your Cruel Logic book on my Audible. So I'm able to hear your narrator and telling it. So that's awesome. And then you could also work or drive while listening to it. So that's amazing. And that's an Audible. Actually, it was through Amazon and I was able to download it onto the app. And or if you're more visual that you want to sit down and read it, then you could just download it or just purchase the actual book. It's always wonderful to have something in your hand and read it just in times before. But a lot of times I get so excited because I want to read it quickly or listen to it quickly that I'll just download it. So however, whatever you want to do, dear listener or watcher, Godawa.com, Godawa.com, or you can go to Amazon and type in Brian Godawa and all of his books are there.
Oh,
So
by the way,
yes.
there's one other thing. I just put this up within the last month. I now have large print editions for most all the novels. Actually, for all the novels. Yeah, for all the novels are in
Awesome.
large print as well. So I found that a lot of my readers are requesting it. And so I finally put those together.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. And I
It's
totally
actually
agree with
really
Mike.
helpful. Like my left eye doesn't see small print anymore, so I appreciate that. I should
Oh,
probably get
yeah,
glasses.
definitely.
But big print
For
and,
sure. That's awesome.
I was just going to say it's a big part of art that I wanted to add that Western artists also have a history of copying from each other. If you look at all great composers and artists,
Absolutely.
you can this is like basic 101 history of art and music
It
and
is.
literature, and everybody copies from everybody. And I just wanted to ask Brian, so if I make a YouTube video and I read a chapter of Cruel Logic, at what point can I read and then comment where you're not going to sue me, just for the sake of people that are interested in what we were saying earlier, what you were alluding to?
Yeah. Like I said, dude, you've got, it's not up to me. It's fair use.
Right.
And so you just, as far as I can tell, I've seen YouTube videos. They'll watch an entire video of that someone else put out, and they'll just have themselves pictured there watching it, and they'll stop and comment. And as far as I'm concerned, that's legitimate. So why couldn't you read someone's novel and comment on it as you're reading it? I don't think you'd want to take the 12 hours to read the whole novel out anyway. So I don't think that's going to be a problem.
That's very
great.
humble and generous of you, sir. And if I had the time, I would read all of your novels and comment on each paragraph of them.
Thank you. I
Keep
appreciate that.
going, sir. You are doing something that is going to change the entire next generation of
Yes.
Christians, and I'm not kidding. As a homeschooler myself who was affected by Frank Peretti and other novelists that were trendsetters and not afraid to go out into the fringes and then produce that content, whether you have a big movie or not, which we should have Frankie Peretti movies. I wonder why Hollywood doesn't like that stuff. It'd be the best movie ever. All the crap on Netflix, every single one of your novels should have been and should be and will be an incredible series, but do not stop producing content. It's going to change the world. It's going to change souls. Absolutely important. So thank you so much. And it's a very big honor to talk to you.
You are too kind.
And also, we do want to remember one young lady whose salvation, it has been
Oh, yes.
attributable to Brian here. What I'm trying to say is
she was on our last episode, right?
Yes, she was on our last episode,
Yeah.
Christina. And just in case you may not just in case you might not have seen our last show with Brian Godawa in March of 2022, a year and a half ago, my gosh. So Christina had come forward and said that she was, believe it or not, a stripper, but she was interested in fallen angels and Nephilim and various what she thought was mythology. And so she had the thought in her head, what if fallen angels and these various creatures were actually real? So she did a Google search for fallen angels and Nephilim and stumbled upon Brian Godawa's books, and she started reading his books and started listening to them, and it changed her life. And she stopped stripping, and she's in a legitimate job right now. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but yes, they're both legal, but one is ethical and one is not.
Well, it's beautiful, but hey, I stopped stripping when I started reading Brian Godawa's books too. So just
thank God for that.
little known fact.
It's interesting. I had actually,
Mike.
I had someone on Facebook respond to one of my posts that she was a pagan, and she started reading the novels because I have pagan gods in there and stuff like that. And she also said that she gave up worshiping the goddess. She worshipped a goddess, and she gave that up and became a Christian.
Wow!
I thought, praise God! That is so
Jesus.
cool. I would have
awesome.
idea that would happen. That is so. To God be the glory for sure.
Oh, praise God. That is awesome. And that's directly from your imagination. And I'm so happy that you followed the leading and guidance of the Lord, and you're doing exactly what the Lord has created you to do. And believe it or not, Brian, I am actually going through a Write Your Book in 30-day program. And it's because I need that heave-ho and I need that hand-holding and guidance from this particular organization that will help with writing as well as the editing and the publishing, the marketing of it all. So I'm hoping and praying that I can hopefully follow in your footsteps, but I'm more of a nonfiction writer. So I felt like the Lord has placed it on my heart to write about my story first, to amplify it. And then I feel like the Lord wants me to write like Christian self-help books, like finding the right Christian mate or whatever, or the top 20 conspiracy theories, or what to do when you become red-pilled suddenly. I don't know. So I still love Christian fiction for sure. And by the way, I had read, I'm reading Cruel Logic, and the book beforehand was Enoch, which was amazing. And because I have a hard time going through sometimes just the Bible, just from start to finish. And so to read amplifications of the stories there, they're awesome. And then before that, I read Dragon King, which was amazing. And then before that, the very first book I had stumbled upon was at Liberty University in the Christian cinema class, and it was Hollywood Worldviews. And so I knew of you back in 2013. And so I'm really blessed by your work, sir. And thank you so much for your time tonight, Brian. We really appreciate you. It's been a pleasure and honor once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Jerry and Michael. And I look forward to the next time we'll meet.
Absolutely,
More
yes.
things to ask you.
We would love to have you back for a continuation of Cruel Logic or your next novel or book. Or, by the way, can you throw us a bone here? What kind of novel will you write next time?
Oh
Yeah,
yes.
that was what I was going to ask. This
Yeah.
is
Oh,
this
I'm
is a new
sorry,
direction.
Michael.
What's coming next?
Yeah, I'm
You
preparing
did
for
it.
my next Watcher novel. That's the next
Cool.
series
Okay.
that I'm developing. And my goal, my hope would be to do a Watcher novel and then do another theological thriller novel, which I've already got that idea, which is it's just wild. And if the concept of Cruel Logic blew your mind, this one will blow your mind even more. But that will be after my next Watcher novel. And I used to get 2 books done a year, but I've been having a lot of business stuff that I've had develop with my books and stuff because it's my living. And so I've slowed down for the last couple of years. And plus I moved, that takes away 6 months of your life.
Oh, yeah.
So I've only been getting 1 book a year lately. I want to get back to 2, but for sure the next book within next year will be a new Watchers one. And I can't say what it is yet because I don't want people to know too far in advance. But it's going to be good.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be great. We're excited to read your next novel. All right.
Come to North Carolina. We'll help you
Come
get a
to
discount
Florida.
on some Airbnb for a few
All
weeks
right.
and get some inspirations to those
Keep
mountains.
that in mind.
Absolutely.
We'd love
Thank
to
you
have
so
you.
much. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Brian.
dear listener or watcher, for watching or listening to the Strange O'Clock podcast with Jerry, and
Michael.
as well as our special guest, Brian Godawa. Have a good morning, good
you,
afternoon,
everyone.
and good evening wherever you are at in the world.
Thank you.